put it into here called class files. Okay, I'm going to put a folder on my desktop called class files. I'm going to call this one my penguin. Not even sure if that's how you spell penguin. Looks good enough for me. So if we're on a PC, it's slightly different. I think there's just an icon along the top here that says like new folder. Hover above them. Create a new folder called class files. Name our document penguin, and let's click save. Okay, these Illustrator options, just leave them all by default and click OK. So to get started, what we've got is I've hand-drawn our penguin, and we're going to redraw over the top of it. And it's a really common way that I work and a lot of illustrators work, is that it's easier to draw on my notebook, take a photo of it or a scan, and actually just draw over the top of it in Illustrator. It's not how everyone works. You can go straight into Illustrator, but it's going to give us at least a template to draw over the top of, just to make it a bit easier for us now. So to make that happen, let's go to File, and let's go to Place. Place is the word, it's interchangeable with import. Illustrator likes to call it place though. So File, Place, we'll bring in our image. Let's find the exercise files that you've downloaded, and in there should be one called penguin.jpg. Now before you click Place, what we're going to do is click on this word template. I'll show you what it does. Let's make sure template is clicked. Let's click Place. And what ends up happening is with my black arrow, if I click off in the background, can you see I can't move this image? So what it does is it brings it in, it puts it on its own layer, it locks that layer and dims it down a little bit so it's easier to draw over the top of. Now mine's put it in the middle of this document. Yours is probably off to the side here a little bit. So let's look at kind of unlocking that layer and moving it around. So up here in your layers panel, layer 1 is where we're going to do our drawing. This layer here called template, you can kind of see template penguin. What it's done is it's created a layer and it's locked it. Okay, so it means I can't move it around, which is super handy. But let's say I want to move it over a little bit. Let's click on the locking icon. Click on this now. Now, okay, using my black arrow, just clicking and dragging the center anywhere. Okay, now it's unlocked. Okay, so hopefully you can see the benefits of using that template. I can lock it again now. Go back to my layer 1. Okay, make sure it is highlighted and I can do my drawing on that layer. And this helpful little layer is just underneath, dimmed down a little bit, the opacity is down a little bit, and it's locked, making it easy to draw. All right, so that's it for setting up our document, just getting it ready for drawing over the top of. What we'll do in the next video is that we'll start drawing with our shapes, okay, lines and rectangles to make our cute little penguin that for some unknown reason is a sheriff, mainly because I needed to show you how to draw a star. But let's do that in the next video. Hi there, in this video we are going to redraw this pencil penguin, okay, over the top using shapes and lines using Illustrator. We'll turn them off and yeah, it's our short little squat penguin. But look how happy he is. Alright, let's get started. Alright, to get started, what we're going to do is we're going to grab our rectangle tool over here in my toolbar. If you can't see the rectangle tool, it might be that if you click and hold this kind of where this option might be, it might be set to something like the ellipse tool. And to change it back to the rectangle tool, all you do is click, hold until these options appear. And then just click on the rectangle tool. Also to get started, just make sure you're on your layers panel and make sure you're on layer 1. In your properties panel, I want to make sure we're going to change our fill and stroke. The fill is the center color of our rectangle and the stroke is the line around the outside. So what you do is you click on this first little icon, doesn't matter what color it is currently, pick a random color. Okay, and because we're going to change it in a second, but I just wanted you to get used to it. Then you can click back on this icon to close it back up. And in the stroke, click on this and just make sure it's set to black. Then click, you don't actually have to click back on this. You can just click anywhere and it closes back down. And I want to make sure that the stroke is set to 1 point. Okay, it's just a nice thin line that goes around the outside. So let's draw a random rectangle. Don't worry if it doesn't kind of line up. We're going to use it for the body of our penguin. So you can see the fill is the center color and the stroke is the line around the outside. What you might see is this kind of like faint blue line or a red line depending on your computer. What it means is it just means it's got it selected. So if we go about black arrow, this is your kind of like safety tool. Always go back to your black arrow if you're not too sure what to do. You know, you've got all these selected, just go back to the black arrow. It's the one you're going to use the most. And what you can do is click in the background here. So I just clicked once and it deselected our rectangle. You can see the stroke around the outside a lot clearer. So it just goes blue when we have it selected. So what I'd like to do is, I like to keep the black line, but not the fill. To do it, you have to have it selected. So black arrow, click it in the middle anywhere. And over here, click on fill. And to have none, see this little red line here? If you hover above it, it tells you, but that means I want nothing in there, please. And I'm just going to click in the background to close that little fill panel. Great, so I've got a line around the outside but no fill, and what you'll notice is it's a little bit different to select. So I click in the background now. What happens is if I click the center, you can see it just doesn't work like it did when it was filled with green because there is no center now. So if I want to select this rectangle now, I've got to click the edge once. So black arrow, click the edge and it should be selected. Now what I'd like to do is using these white squares, okay, I just want you to resize it, okay, so that it kind of matches the edges of our little penguin here. All right, not very exciting. Let's get into slightly more exciting when we start looking at the corners. So black arrow, make sure the edge of it's selected. You see these little targets in the corners. These are called corner options. And all they do is click, hold, and drag it with your mouse. Just drag it towards the center of the rectangle. Cool, huh? So that's making all the corners nice and rounded. Okay, so that's kind of what I want. It's got the top, but not the bottom. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use this thing called edit, and we're going to use undo. It just goes back one step. Okay, undo to undo what you did. Okay, and it keeps going back. You can keep hitting undo right back to the beginning of the document. You can also redo it. Now, I'm going to use the shortcuts throughout this course because it's a really common thing to do, go to undo. And on my Mac, it's Command Z. On a PC, it should be Control Z. Okay, or you can just go up to that long way, it's fine. What I'd like to do is I would like to have just one of the corners selected. So look at this little icon here, take note of the color. If I click it once, you can see it's kind of changed, it's inverted. So it's kind of selected when the other ones are not. What I mean by that is if you click and drag that one now, okay, so you click it once and then click and drag it, you can see it just affects that one. I could do the same here, click him once, he goes to that alternate color. Now I click and drag him, okay, I can kind of just work with these individual corners. Now my radius is a little bit different on both sides. So what I'd like to do is go to edit, undo again. So it's back to being a square, and I'm going to show you how to click both of them. So you select the first one, like we did before, just click it once with the black arrow. But if you hold your shift key down on your keyboard, shift key is going to play a pretty big part in Illustrator. Okay, so hold down shift, click on the second one. It means that I can select more than one at a time. So these guys at the bottom aren't selected, these guys at the top. If I grab one of them, click, hold, drag it, they both come along for the ride. Now I know they match. And a last minute change to my design, I'm going to click this bottom one once and just tuck it up. I wanted to have like a little bit of a penguin belly. He was a bit stumpy before, he's still stumpy. But anyway, you don't have to follow exactly. So we learned what fill and stroke is. Strokes around the outside, fills in the middle, and we looked at these corner options. Let's start building some other parts. Let's draw the circle for his kind of eye there. So click, hold, keep holding down your mouse and then release on this ellipse tool. So with the ellipse tool, what we're going to do is click and drag over here. And what you'll notice is I can click and drag any sort of size. So that's fine. Can't have any sort of weird size. I'm going to undo a few times. What I'd like to do is I want it to be a perfect circle. Okay, that shift is a really kind of usable tool. So when I start dragging out, if I hold down the shift key while I'm doing it, you can see it locks the height and width. And that's true of rectangles or stars, polygons, circles. Okay, so I'm going to get it to roughly the right size. I'm going to grab my black arrow. I'm going to click either the edge, or if you can see this dot here, grab the dot. Okay, little center. If you've got it the wrong size, okay, say it's just still too big, and you try to line it up, and you're like, it's kind of close. Okay, what you can do is you can resize it. Just like we did before, is that I can grab any of these little guys in the corner. The trouble with resizing it this way is you can see I'm kind of distorting the shape. So what I want to do is before I do it, so I've undone a couple of times, is if I hold the shift key and grab any of the corners, doesn't matter which corner it is, okay, it will lock the height and width, like we did when we created the circle. Okay, so holding shift just kind of locks the height and width until I get to a rough size. Now my circle's not perfect, okay, so don't worry too much about it. Another thing you can do here is if you're finding that you're trying to line it up and it's like jumping all around, okay, get it close to where you want it. And then with your keyboard, so I got my black arrow, look down at your keyboard, you've got your up, down, left, right, your cursors. Okay, so I'm just using my cursor arrow keys just to kind of tap it around a little bit. Okay, a little bit left, a little bit up. That often can be a nicer way to just to kind of do fine adjustments in Illustrator. All right, let's do this little upside down curve. It makes him the happy, content penguin. But he seen Pingu? Anyway, here's my inspiration for this one. So what we're going to do is I could draw a curve. There's lots of ways of doing curves. There's this really easy way though, is if you click and hold down, so hold down the line segment tool, there's an arc tool. Okay, so with the arc tool, just draw it anywhere out here. It doesn't really matter too much which way it goes because we can rotate it. So do it so it's kind of a nice curve-ish. And what I'd like to do is go back to my black arrow. Remember, this is our default go back to it tool. And it does so many things. We used it to resize the circle a second ago. We can also use it to rotate. Now, what we need to do is we need to zoom in a little bit. So who remembers what the shortcut was? You remember, right? It's Command plus on a Mac or Control plus on a PC. So just zoom in a little bit. I'm going to show you why in a second. To rotate this thing, we need to be in a kind of a special zone. So when we were resizing it before, remember we held Shift and we dragged this up and down to make it kind of bigger and smaller? The rotation's very close. So clicking on the corner and dragging resizes it. But watch this. If I move my cursor just a bit further out into this kind of like, so too close? Nope. Perfect. Too far. Perfect. Too far. This is kind of like every corner has this kind of like rotation zone in it. And you'll wiggle your mouse around and hopefully find it. You're looking for that kind of bent arrow. And if you click, hold, and drag there, just click, hold, drag your mouse, it'll start moving it around. Okay, and just kind of find it again, drag it around until it's kind of a curve that you could use for an eye. Now I want to move down a little bit. I could use these little sliders, they're fine. What's the shortcut? You remember, spacebar, click, hold, and drag. Okay, and just move it down, and mine's way too big, so I'm holding Shift. Just kind of rotating it around a bit. Don't worry if it's not the right perfect curve. We're gonna show you different ways of doing it in a second, but yeah, it's close enough. Drag it in the corner. Using my arrow keys just to line it up perfectly. So to draw nice, good-looking curves, you can use the arc tool. You can rotate it by that little special area, kind of just outside the scaling part. Just out a bit further, that's rotation. Next thing we'll look at is we'll look at the stroke. This stroke, if I click off in the background, it's pretty thin. I want it to kind of be nice and thick in the inside here because it's a bit more of a design feature. So I'm going to select it once with my black arrow. And over here, okay, where it says stroke, I'm going to use this little up arrow. You can drop this down and pick one, or you can just use the up arrow just to click and pick a size. I'm going to pick 4 point. For no good reason, just looks thick enough. And that looks fine. I'm going to click off in the background, and I've got this kind of like rainbow kind of shaped thing. What I'd like it to do is I'm going to eventually round all these corners, just the theme I'm going for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a little trick. If you click on the stroke here, we're going to look at what's called capping. Capping is the end here. Can you see it's a straight line? I would like it to be like a little bulbous end. Okay, so I'm going to click on it once. Over here, our stroke, we don't have many options, right? We have color and we have the size of it. But if you click on the word stroke, ta-da, there's all sorts of nerdy stuff in there. Okay, so what we're going to do in this case is, it's called the capping, the unfortunately named butt cap, and then there's a second one, the round cap. Click on that. We all keep straight face, right? Butt cap. The second one, round cap's kind of what we want, right? It's kind of this nice, more gentle end on it. Okay, this one here, the last one, I don't use projecting cap. Kind of just the butt cap versus projecting cap. You can kind of see what it does. It puts it like a square on the outside. But I'm going to use a rounded cap. That can really help you later on when you're working with Illustrator and you've got some really like ugly edges or ends of strokes. Just switching them to a rounded cap can like finish them off nicely. We'll look at stroke a little bit more in another video, but that's it for now. Let's click off in the background, click off. Happy, smiley, content penguin. All right, next up, we'll do some triangles. So I want to do the beak. I want to do the flipper, his wing, I don't know, penguins, and his tail. So they're all kind of triangles with rounded edges. So to do a triangle is you hold down the ellipse tool or the rectangle tool, and you're going to move to this one called the polygon tool. So a triangle is essentially a polygon, just a three-sided one. By default, you're going to get a pentagon. I don't know. I'm not sure what that one is, but I'm going to delete it using my delete key on my keyboard. What I want to do is just click once instead of dragging out, and it gives you the polygon options. So I've got the polygon tool selected, and I just click once on my screen, and it gives you some options before you start drawing. And I'm going to pick 3 sides, please. Not going to worry about the radius for the moment. I'm going to resize it once I'm done. So 3 sides, click OK, and I get this kind of giant triangle. So first up, let's resize it and rotate it. So I'm going to use my black arrow, make sure it's selected by clicking the edge of it. I'm going to make sure it has no fill, make sure it has a black stroke, and I'm not too worried about the size of it just yet. So to resize it and rotate it, resizing, remember, is just grabbing this corner bit here and just getting it down to a size. Rotating it is that magical area around the outside. Now what you might want to do is, at the moment when you're rotating, it just kind of goes around in random degrees. If you hold shift, remember that magical tool? Okay, hold down the shift key on your keyboard